remember getting done with law school and starting a job, and I decided, a little bit of wellness would probably be in order. So I jumped on a scale, and I saw what the weight was. I thought, well, it's not too bad, but maybe lose a few pounds. So the way I was going to lose a few pounds was to play basketball once a week. Well, that didn't work. I didn't gain weight. I didn't lose weight. Instead, I gained weight. And at one point in time, I got on the scale and saw a number with a 0 on it that I never thought I would see. So I knew at that point in time, either one of two things are going to happen. Either I'm going to do something about it, or I'm going to continue to gain weight. So I decided to do something about it. So I watched my diet a little bit, but what I'm going to talk about is I started to exercise. So the reason, what I was going to do is I was going to start running. So my first run I went out for was 3 miles long, and the first 2 miles were fine. On the third mile just about killed me, but I kept at it and continued to work on it, and I got to the point where running 3 miles was just fine. So then I decided to run 4. It was kind of the same thing. I could run the 3 miles, but the 4th mile just about killed me, but I kept at it and got to be able to run that 4 miles comfortably. Then it became 5 and so forth. At some point I decided to run a half marathon. Well, I crashed and burned. Not during the race. I crashed and burned during the training for the race and didn't even come close to completing it. But the next year I decided to try again and actually ran a half marathon. So then I had a couple buddies who said, hey, Farrell, you got to run a marathon. We're going to run a marathon. Why don't you run with us? And I said, no, I have no interest in doing that. I don't need to do that to accomplish my goals, so you guys go have fun. So they told about 500 people that the 3 of us were going to run a marathon. At some point in time, I decided it's easier just for train for and run this race rather than explain why I wasn't going to run the race. So that's what I did. I ran the inaugural Des Moines Marathon, and I finished it. That's what I can say. That was about it. So then the same 2 guys decided, hey, we're going to run the New York Marathon. Why don't you do that with us? And I said, okay, I'm interested in that, because I'd never been to New York City before, and I knew it was a lottery. So the chances of all 3 of us getting through this lottery were pretty much nil. Well, of course, we got all through the lottery the first year, so I had to actually run the race. My training went pretty well, but I got sick before the race and lost about 10 pounds right before the race and just crushed me. I crossed the finish line, I'll say that. And as I was crossing the finish line, I said something like, I am never again going to run a marathon. So we're on YouTube, so you can guess what else might have said. I actually said it out loud, I think. So, but I think the people around me were feeling about the same way, so I don't think they really cared. So that was going to be it. Well, then a couple years go by, and I thought, I've never really done this for myself. So I told my wife I was thinking about running another marathon. She said, hey, we're going to go on vacation. Why don't you find a race that's near our vacation spot? And that was great for her because we were going to the Black Hills in South Dakota. And the race that aligned up with that vacation has an altitude that goes up near a mile high, which you cannot replicate in Urbandale, Iowa. And that race has a hill. That hill is 12 miles long. And you cannot replicate that in Urbandale, Iowa. But I ran the race, and actually by far my best time I've ever run. And then I heard the race director tell people that you can basically knock off 20 minutes from your time because this marathon is so hard. So I did the math. I thought, wow, I'm like pretty close to being able to qualify for the Boston Marathon. For those of you who don't know, the Boston Marathon is the most famous road race in the world. So I ran a race up in Minnesota, a little bit short, and then I ran in Chicago the next year and actually qualified for the Boston Marathon. So there you go. I started off barely being able to run 3 miles, and then I qualified and ran the most famous race in the entire world. And the reason I tell you that story is because it somewhat parallels my legal career. I mean, I won't say I crashed and burned in law school. It probably wouldn't be fair. But I did get burned out and probably didn't do as well as I would have liked to have done. And as a result, I didn't have a lot of offers when I came out of law school. But I found a clerkship in the courthouse where I'm currently working. And that was a great opportunity to learn about research and writing with 3 good judges that helped teach me. So that served as a base bone for the writing abilities that I have today. And then I got out of that clerkship. I still didn't have a lot of offers. So I took a job with the Attorney General's office doing child support work, which turned out to be a great thing for me because it got me into the courtroom. At that point in time in my life, I was shy. I was a terrible public speaker. I needed to work on those things. And getting into the courtroom and starting to learn how to be a good trial lawyer was something that was really important for me. And as I moved on with the Attorney General's office, I continued to do those kinds of things. I volunteered for whatever it is they would let me do. And I crisscrossed the state doing hearings and trials in county courthouses around the state, and in federal court, and on the Court of Appeals, and in the Iowa Supreme Court. in the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, and later in my career with the Attorney General's office, even successfully petitioned to get to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is kind of like the legal equivalent of qualifying for the Boston Marathon. So I feel very privileged I was able to accomplish all those things. I don't run marathons anymore, but I continue to challenge myself from a legal standpoint. So I was an administrative law judge for a long time, as you know, and at the time I entered that job, it was not a well-regarded profession, but in part due to my work there and recruiting other people, and then eventually moving into leadership, by the time I left, it was a highly regarded place to work, and it continues to be so to this day. And then over 10 years ago, I became a district court judge, and you can see my record. I mean, I've done 90-some jury trials. I'm not sure if any judge has done more than that over the last 10 years. Maybe they have, but I would question that. And you see the body of work I otherwise have with the constitutional cases and other big matters that I've dealt with. So last year, I came before you. I was looking for another challenge. And I appreciate that this commission nominated me to the Court of Appeals. I very much appreciate that. But, so to speak, I didn't quite meet the qualifying time because I wasn't picked. And now here I am back in the race again and wanting another opportunity. I fully understand that because I was nominated last time doesn't mean I'll be nominated this time. There's a whole other group of people in this process. And sometimes things line up differently than they do the process before. So I appreciate that. But I still got a great application. I think I'm still one of the best writers and researchers on the district court. I've done a lot of different big-time cases, and I have a lot of different experiences that I think I would bring to the court. So I think it would be a win-win with me bringing the experiences and my abilities to the Court of Appeals and allow me to exercise what would probably be the last big challenge of my career if I was so selected. So I hope that you will nominate me again to give me another opportunity to take my case to the governor.
Thank you. We'll start questions with Commissioner Chase.
Thank you. Thank you for your application. When I heard from attorneys about you, one of the things that was said was that you're an excellent judge to appear in front of and to hear cases without regard to the outcome. So first of all, I think that's a fantastic thing to have said about you. What do you believe are the characteristics that you possess, or how do you handle your courtroom that lead attorneys to that result?
Yeah, this is a good thing about being experienced and doing a lot of different things over your career. So I worked for Judge Novak, was one of the judges that I worked for, and some of the people in the room will remember him. But he was always really engaged with the lawyers. It didn't really matter what kind of case it was, whether it's big or small. He was going to ask questions to the lawyers in a way that wasn't confrontational, but in a way that he showed that he had read the materials and wanted to really get down to knowing what their case was about. And I think that process was something I learned from him, and I wanted to incorporate as part of my practice. The practice of law is stressful, and it doesn't have to be any more stressful than that in the courtroom. So I want people to be relaxed. They perform better when they're relaxed. I can get information better from them when they're relaxed. And that's the type of aura I want to be present in the courtroom. I think it should be, practice law should be fun, right? We don't always think that, but there's a reason why they have TV shows and movies about lawyers. And I want the courtroom to be fun and to be rewarding for people who come and appear in front of me. So that's the type of tenor that I run in the courtroom.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyer.
Judge Farrell, thanks again for your application. I have no further questions at this time.
Commissioner Marquardt.
Thank you for your application. So one of the things that is identified in the application is cases where you've written a significant opinion on a constitutional issue. I think you have the distinction of having written more than any other applicant today. Tell us about the process that you follow when you're writing on those cases and how that experience would translate to the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be pretty similar, but I usually try to look at the law, to some degree, so I know where I'm heading into the case. Although the most recent case I had on constitutional issues, which dealt with a statute that restricted sexually explicit materials and materials involving nudity in the prison system. I went into that trial actually not wanting to look at a bunch of law because I wanted to keep an open mind when I heard from these prisoners. They didn't have lawyers, But some of these inmates are not, are not dumb. Some of them, understand the basics of how they're going to prove their case. So I wanted to keep an open mind throughout the entire trial until I heard all the evidence. In that sense, I kind of treated it a little bit like a jury trial. And then I got into the to the research from there. And it was unfortunate. I honestly, I didn't, get a lot of really extensive briefing, I thought, from the state. They kind of held their hopes on a circuit case, which I didn't think was as good for them as they thought. But I just did a circuit court search, and I found all kinds of cases, in this area. And as I started to get into the case law, I found just what I thought was, a great deal of case that weighed in favor of constitutionality of the statute, which I wasn't sure about when I started writing the decision. So as I read more and more and read and understood the rationale behind those decisions, I ultimately reached that conclusion. So that's how I did it in that case, but a lot of other cases, you don't really do it that way. You might start off doing more of the law. Like with the Planned Parenthood case, the second case I did, I wanted to understand what the law was more because I was going to hear evidence in that case. I wanted to be able to pinhole where that evidence I thought was going to fit within what the federal standard was, which is what I thought the Iowa Supreme Court was going to do at that time. It turns out they didn't do it, and now they've kind of done it again, but it's an evolving area. But that case, I did it a little bit differently. So I don't think there's any one way to go about doing things. Sometimes it depends upon the case. Sometimes it means hearing the facts first and then working on the law, or sometimes starting with the law and then determining how the facts work into that.
Thank you.
Commissioner DeFord?
Thank you for your application, Judge Farrell. Like many other applicants, you are serving as a district judge currently. You also served 11 years as an administrative law judge. How does that experience translate to or contribute to a position on the Court of Appeals?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful because a lot of the cases I dealt with as an administrative law judge dealt with self-represented people. So when you're writing for and you're having hearings with self-represented people, you want them to understand they've been heard. So it usually started with me with the hearing, and I wasn't going to leave that hearing without talking to them a little bit about what the law was as applied to that case and how I was going to start to evaluate the law as it applied to their case. Because you can write a great decision that they can understand, but they might not even read it, but they have to listen to you. So I wanted to give them a kind of at least an outline for how the case might be decided, at the hearing itself. And then, with the decision for self-represented people, you don't want to write it with a lot of legalese. You want to write with basic terminology. And, that's easy for me because I only know like 300 words, I think. So, I kind of try to keep it simple. And some of you may know this, but, if you, on Word, you can actually run a program off of it that shows you what the grade level is. Well, my goal is right at the 10th grade level. And it's not because I'm trying to oversimplify things, but when you write simply, then people understand it, and they understand it quickly. And that's good, for judges. I want to be able to understand a brief that a lawyer writes for me. So I try to do the same thing when I'm writing, whether it be now as a district court judge, but I think that's one thing I really worked on as an administrative law judge.
Thank you.
Commissioner Parrish?
Judge Farrell, I've had the opportunity to appear in front of you in the courtroom. Your comments are quite accurate about how you make lawyers feel. Now, I hope no appellate judges out there listening to this today, but the thing that kind of perturbs me a little bit is more and more decisions are coming down from the appellate court indicating that the lawyer did not preserve the record on certain matters. And when you dig down into those transcripts, you'll find out, well, this lawyer was trying to make the record. The judge kept cutting them off. They kept cutting them off. They couldn't do it. If you track down, you'll find that. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening. Can you tell us about your experience and what the comments you made about how you want lawyers to feel to make a good record, and how would you bring that into our Court of Appeals then?
Yeah, there are times, where the judge wants to get to it, but you do have to allow lawyers to make their records, to preserve things on appeal. And I think one thing I would bring on the Court of Appeals is, I would understand how that happens at the lower court. And if there's, an appearance that the lawyer is trying to make the record, or or, you know, at least partially made the record, you know, I'm not inclined to punish the lawyer for that, especially if the judge was interrupting or the lawyer was interrupting and things just weren't going well. And I think that's one thing I can do very well, because I can place those kinds of things in context, because I've been there for such a long time. And understanding that, I think, will be helpful to the colleagues, to my colleagues on the, and some of them have been district court judges too, but you know, other than Judge Chicelli, I don't think the breadth of the experience that I have at the district court. So I think understanding that and bringing that up into the equation of the discussion when you're decision writing at the Court of Appeals, I think that's something I would definitely bring to the table.
Thank you.
Commissioner Graber?
Good morning.
Morning.
I have enjoyed hearing about your breadth of experience that you have and what I believe makes you a great candidate for the Court of Appeals. If I could flip the script, but I'm going to put some precautions on here, but I'm going to give you a magic button that you can push that will make you the best candidate possible, but the button can't have anything to do with running marathons. So if you push that button, what would happen?
If I could, okay, I'm not sure I understand your question. You push the button to make me a better candidate
Yes.
than I am right now?
Yep.
You know, that's a really good question, because, you know, I've had a lot of experience doing big, complicated, high-profile cases, which I think is important for the Court of Appeals, because they're getting more of those types of cases. I mean, the Supreme Court doesn't take that many cases. The Supreme Court, or the Court of Appeals, decides almost all of them at the first impression. So I think, you know, you got to be able to do that. But I also have a lot of experience dealing with, you know, pro se litigants and individuals, where you have to be able to explain to them, you know, how a decision is going to impact their life. And I have everything in between. So I think, you know, I just don't, you know, over a 35-year career, which involves a lot of different types of experience, I'm not sure how much more I could possibly do that would put me in a better position. And I don't mean to sound arrogant about it, but I mean, I've done a lot of things and at a lot of different levels. So I just can't think of a lot more that I could possibly do that would put me in a better position for a seat on the Court of Appeals. So I know that's not a very good answer.
No,
but-
that's okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Schnur?
Thank you. Judge, thanks for your application again. It's nice to see you. Quick question. In looking at your experience, you practiced as a clerk, you worked for the state of Iowa, you were administrative law judge for the state and a district court judge. Some might think one of the things that's lacking is representing, having a real human being client where you're, as you said, and you've talked about talking to pro se litigants, sat down next to you and had to represent them in the courtroom and explain the process and so forth. Tell me and tell us why that should not be a concern.
You're talking about private practice experience?
Yeah, just private
Yeah.
practice.
So there's the answer for you, Mr. Graber. That's what I probably should have said. Thank you, Mr. Schnur. Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. And as a district judge, I'm always wanting to be surrounded by other judges who have been in private practice, because they're good resources for me, because I don't have that on my background. I do think I'm representing agencies at the Attorney General's office. I did have probably more of what felt like a private practice experience than a lot of different lawyers, even with the Attorney General's office. I'm representing the Department of Public Safety is like, you know, representing a big corporate client in a way. And I worked with people, you know, all the way down to the police officer level, you know, to the very top, the Commissioner of Public Safety. And, you know, I had to develop layers of trust with those people who were troopers, special agents, you know, things like that, because sometimes they had conflicts with their bosses. So, you know, how can I work with them to keep their trust and still be able to represent the agency, which might have a different view on things? So I worked very hard on trying to balance those kinds of things, and I think that's probably a little bit more what you have to do in practice. I never, and I'd have to give bad news to my clients. It might not be as personal as it is when you're a private practice, particularly some, you know, certain types of cases like family law, where they feel like their world's coming apart, or certainly employment law almost feels the same way. If someone's lost a job, and working with that client. I mean, it's more than just legal. It's emotional as well. But I've had a couple of cases where that came into play, where the tensions rose that high. So I always tried to work with my clients to make sure they understood how the decisions were coming down and keep them apprised of cases to make sure that there weren't any surprises. So that's probably the best I can tell you. But I do appreciate that private practice experience is something that's very beneficial.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And we are out of time, so we thank you for your application and wish you all the best.
All right, thank you very much.
And quit hanging out with friends that make you run marathons.
I'm easily influenced.